After retiring as Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Nimitz reflected on his time as Fleet Admiral during World War II to a group of students at the Naval War College. He commented that the conflict with Japan had been played out so many times through wargames that nothing had come as a surprise, except for one thing, and that was the Japanese kamikaze tactics at the end of the war. No one had anticipated that. As we shift our focus from the insurgency conflicts we've been fighting for the past 20 years to the near-peer threats of today, we find ourselves in a similar position. Senior leaders at all levels are calling to utilize wargames and simulations to rehearse what future conflict will look like. Former Secretary Mattis called for 25 bloodless battles before ever facing real life or death combat. And more recently, the Commandant in his initial planning guidance dictated that we maximize use of wargames and simulations. But how do we know if we're exploring the full action space of our adversaries? And perhaps more importantly, how do we learn the best ways to counter those strategies? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Captain Jonathan Boron. I'm a student at the Naval Postgraduate School studying modeling and simulation with a focus on artificial intelligence. I don't want Marines to fight 25 bloodless battles. I want them to fight 25 million. Imagine a world where Marines can train against virtual enemies that are intelligent and adaptive. Every time a Marine fights an opponent, not only does the Marine get better, but so does the adversary. This virtual enemy learns the patterns and habits of the Marine, identifying weaknesses that can be exploited. But at the same time, it recognizes its own vulnerabilities, making it more and more difficult for the Marine to achieve victory. This ever-changing and evolving opponent provides the Marine a competitive partner that can be used to test the effectiveness of new tactics, equipment, or even force structures. Sounds a lot like science fiction, right? But this may not be as implausible as it seems. Wargaming and combat modeling are not new concepts. From the ancient Chinese to the German Kriegspiel to Lanchester equations, and now to the modern computer-based simulations, which can consider such minute details as armor thickness. While the rules, processes, and graphics have certainly grown more sophisticated, the underlying mechanisms have not. I will highlight two of the most common ways to run a wargame. The first method is human versus human. That is, whether on sandtable or computer, two opposing teams of humans face off in a game of wits and intellect. A human player, even if considered an expert in the field, makes decisions based on knowledge and experience. He or she knows what works and what doesn't work, and crafts what is believed to be the best solution from previous occurrences. But this acumen is based on what has been successful in the past, and may not be optimal for the future. Certainly humans are adaptive, and even experts continue to learn and optimize, but usually within a narrow scope of states and actions as time becomes a limiting factor. The second method is human versus computer. A program is capable of making lightning-quick decisions and executing with flawless precision. Usually its behaviors are validated by an expert, and its actions reflective of current doctrine and tactics. But even with modern gaming AI capabilities, an automated opponent can quickly become rote and predictable. In this case, the computer is the exact opposite of a human. It can work billions of times faster than any person, but it is incapable of learning or adapting beyond its program logic. So a human can adapt, but is limited to the time it takes to generate experience. And a program can work through a billion different scenarios, but is unable to change its behavior. Here's what I offer you to achieve both. Deep reinforcement learning is an emerging field developed by computer scientists, neurologists, and mathematicians that seeks to replicate the learning processes that are observed in humans and animals. The basic premise is that an AI agent takes actions in its environment. This action causes the environment to change in some way, and the agent receives positive or negative feedback for the result. Consequently, the agent then uses this feedback to shape future actions. After repeating this process enough times, the agent should then have theoretically learned the proper behavior. You can liken it to a Marine learning how to buddy rush. If the Marine advances forward at the same time as his buddy, he'll be scolded by the instructor. But if he stays undercover and provides suppression until his buddy is set, then he'll be praised. Consequently, after several repetitions, he will have learned how to properly buddy rush. What's more, he should not have just learned how to buddy rush in that one specific training area, but should be able to apply the skill in any environment. Now, in practice, deep reinforcement learning doesn't always produce perfect, let alone good results, but it's showing promise. Within the past 2 years, 2 organizations have achieved incredible milestones in this field. DeepMind, which has previously developed expert chess and Go playing systems, trained an agent that was ranked above 99.8% of StarCraft II players. And OpenAI, based not far from MPS in San Francisco, trained a team of agents that beat 99.4% of the world's Dota 2 players, to include the standing world champions. Now, video games are one thing, and military simulations are another, but what makes these two accomplishments so unique is that agents learn to work in an imperfect environment. Fog of war, uncertainty, and a large selection of possible actions all impacted the training process, which is not unlike what we experience in our own training and exercises. Intelligent agents, trained through deep reinforcement learning, pose to be a major asset to the Department of Defense. Agents can be trained to different levels of difficulty, serving as training resources for small unit leaders, mid-grade officers, or even senior leadership. Unit staffs and commanders can test different plans against the AI, helping them to evaluate the best courses of action. And when exploring new doctrinal concepts in force structures, such as what the Marine Corps is doing now, AI can also be used to evaluate and validate the way we plan to operate. It should be noted, though, that deep reinforcement learning is not a miracle solution. Current training methods are expensive and can take days or weeks to produce decent performing systems. And once the system has finished training, it may be limited to the tasks and environments it can perform in. What's more, the data and information used to train the system can inadvertently create biases, which can limit effectiveness, or even worse, create dangerous prejudices. So, apart from board games and video games, one might wonder where we are in developing intelligent military AI agents. Well, much like DeepMind and OpenAI did to work up to their success, here at the Naval Postgraduate School, we are taking a crawl, walk, run approach, starting with fundamental behaviors. Looking at the principles of war, the research I've been working on seeks to train agents to apply the principles of mass and economy of force, and we've already made tremendous progress. Using a simple Lanchester combat model, agents have demonstrated in a company-level 2 versus 2 scenario that they are capable of consolidating forces and flanking a static enemy in a defensive line. In fact, regardless of where they start on the map, they learn that the best course of action is to team up and take on opponents one at a time. Next, in a 3 versus 2 scenario, we pitted 3 AI-controlled companies against 1 opposing company and 1 opposing platoon. By modifying some of the learning parameters, we were able to elicit 2 different types of behavior in the same situation. We first trained an agent to consolidate and destroy opposing forces in a stepwise manner, first the company and then the platoon. Not too dissimilar to our first task, but by reducing the size of the reward the entity receives as combat proceeds longer, we were able to produce a separate behavior, economy of force. Now, rather than sequentially destroying the company and platoon, the agents break up the force into 2 groups and destroy the opposing units in parallel. Now, these examples may not appear to be earth-shattering or mind-blowing, as most programmers could easily code this type of behavior. But what is impressive is that the agents learn the optimal behavior only from the concept that dying is bad and destroying the enemy is good. It started by employing random actions, but eventually learned that teamwork is the best policy. Now, this research is only the first step, as fighting a static enemy on featureless terrain is not representative of real combat. But capitalizing on successful progress, we can incrementally increase the complexity and size of scenarios. This not only includes adding in additional physical components, such as terrain and weather, but more abstract concepts as well, as fog of war and eternal communication can also be modeled. Once we understand the underlying techniques and methods that produce good results, we can then build intricate combat models that more fully represent modern conflict. So if we again consider the war games of World War II, would incorporating deep reinforcement learning have mitigated the surprise of the Japanese kamikaze attacks? To be honest, probably not. It would be naive to think that adaptive artificial intelligence will eliminate all surprise from future conflict, but it can certainly help us explore a large range of enemy actions. Robust software that can learn through what would otherwise be lifetimes of human experience can guide us on what is and is not effective. We can train our leaders against opponents who are not afraid to think outside of the box and employ novel strategies. We can test our plans against adaptive enemies that will exploit weakness not apparent to human logic. And we can guide high-level decision-making, such as equipment acquisition and force structure. My big idea is to improve the way the Marine Corps conducts wargaming and modeling and simulation. Rather than simply fighting 25 bloodless battles, I want to enable Marines to fight 25 million bloodless battles against a cunning and adaptive enemy. Thank you.